on there, and it gives you a link, and that link comes to this website. And the website then gives you various choices for survey possibilities. Obviously, the one that you will want to take a look at is the free one, Get Started. Create surveys and polls in minutes, which is very, very helpful and worth looking at. Real-time reports and data tools, social sharing, embedding, optimizing web and mobile. Lots of things that you can do right in here that one of you in your group should be tasked to look at and begin building, whether you use it or not. I encourage you to use surveys. Now that all of you are in a group that are going to have both the customer perspective and the employee perspective, it occurs to me that you are going to want to, at minimum, look at surveying. It has been my experience that over the years, and when I have participated in my own consultation with businesses, that surveys get the attention of the people sitting in the back. They're very interested to find out what's going on both here and there. The remarkable paradox is that most entrepreneurs, most business owners do not want to do this. And they don't want to do this for obvious reasons. The sort of the perilous response that they may get might be paralytic for their own persona. And so for that reason, they stay away from surveying. But you are not going to stay away from surveying. One of the elements and components of the learning outcomes of this class is for you to do that. And you have a nice link here that I would encourage you to look at when you're thinking about and orchestrating a survey tool. Your statistical N, if you remember in your statistics class, is your number of subjects, your number of people you would survey. I would say that your N variable should be somewhere in the neighborhood of at minimum 25 and preferably closer to 50. So whether you're talking about surveying customers, I would say that N should equal 25 on the L25, H50, L25, H50 here, and likewise in this neck of the woods. So be thinking about delegating and going out and doing this maybe one or two times. It doesn't have to be done overnight. Think about also doing it electronically. I have had a lot of our groups do surveys electronically. They've worked with the HR person or someone internally who can send it out to people, and the people can fill it out electronically and send it back to you. That's also a possibility, maybe a better forum today for a lot of people to do that than actually standing face to face or out in the parking lot. One of the businesses I started many years ago was started largely as a result of surveying. And so I would not underestimate the power of this. And in fact, I would make it part, if at all, parcel to your presentation. The reports I get coming out of commencement and years later is one of the tools that students have felt were something they could put in their tool bag that they can take with them in the future is this. The power of getting out and talking to people and surveying them. It's a powerful tool that's highly underestimated today. So again, on the dashboard in Moodle, on your home page, which I'm going to show you right now. I've already seen that. That was not good. Right here, right up on top, you'll see free survey link. This is what I'm referring to, right up on top there. And that free survey link is what you'll click in order to get at that web page. So it's right there, questionpro.com, pricing we're doing. Again, I don't think it's necessary for you to pay a subscription. I think the 30-day free eval is good enough. If anything, it can be a primer. And if you get some good primer questions, then you as a group can generate your own questions that you think might be more industry specific to the type of business that you're consulting. Yes?
In Google Drive, they have if you go to create a form or create, a Word document or whatever, they have a forms one in there that you can send out as well.
Oh, there's another great example.
I think it's all free. I haven't used it, but I just pulled it up and it looks like it'd be effective.
Good.
And you could just email stuff
Yeah,
off.
yeah.
You can print one.
Yeah, I've heard that that is quite effectual. So there's a number of ways that you can get at this, and for that reason, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through the teaching component of this. Instead, I expect you at this level, at your upper division level, you're graduating to be able to disseminate how to put a survey together. You had a stats class, you know the value of that N number. Yes, you do know that. For that reason, you should be able to get a reasonable sampling, and that sampling would be important for any sort of surveying. And as I said, L25, H50 for your sampling is probably going to be a pretty good standard for what you're going to do. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, good. All right, so surveying, an important component to the whole presentation. You had an opportunity to take a look at the publication portion of this class. I'm going to bring in next week something else, and that's aids for your presentation. Pointed displays, PODs, pointed displays. Pointed displays or PODs are going to be displays in which you're going to have on a tripod something you can print off that will reflect perhaps your balanced scorecard. So the examples I'm going to give you next week are examples from previous classes of best practices where they've actually taken the balanced scorecard and they've produced a very professional piece that a group can reference during their entire presentation. Now tell me why something that might be 3 feet by 3 feet, sitting on a tripod about here, or maybe over here, may be more effectual than on a PowerPoint. Think outside the box for a moment, why that might be more effectual. Yes.
Because you're not clicking through the PowerPoint. It's
That's
just sitting there and
certainly,
people can study it.
that's certainly very meritorious. You're not having to rely on either more slides to do that, but contrarily, you have a tool available to you that you can point to constantly. That is the merit largely around why you want a POD. I think it makes a lot of sense. The better presentations are the ones that have spent a little bit of money. It's going to cost you, again, I'm talking a little bit of money split among your groups, so the larger groups that are better, you're by way of marginalizing some of these costs. It costs maybe $75 to $100 to do a good one, and I'm going to bring in one that costs our group $75. Office Depot doesn't. So there was another outfit here in town last year who did it, but I think they went out of business. They should have been consulted, but they were not. But they did it, and it was really inexpensive, and that's probably why they went out of business, because they had a price point that was ridiculous. They're basically giving away these things. But a POD would be quite effectual in your presentation, rather than relying on slides when you are making your presentation. Next week and the week after next, I will bring those in. I'll display them here, they'll be in your face. You can take a picture of them, you can start looking into that. But one of you in your team is going to want to spend a little bit of time doing some research here once you see that, maybe beginning this week, what it would take to recreate a balanced scorecard, not quite this size, a little smaller than that size, that can fit on a tripod that you can use as a reference tool, number one. Number two, the better groups, and I don't think I see it reflected in these. By the way, I'll come back to my thought in just a moment. This is exceptional. This is exceptional. I had a student in here who's now the president of Members First, Terry. And so she was quite interested in having this done for Members First, I think knowing that at the time, as an executive VP, that slot for our presidency was opening up, and we did this. This is way up there. I don't expect you to aspire maybe quite this high, because frankly, this was anal. But it's good. But it's good, right? It's good. This is quite good too. This was done a long time ago, but it still rises to a fairly high competency level. And I brought the farmers in for your benefit, just to take a look at that, but they did a nice job. I'll come back and I'll talk about the elements of the booklet. That'll be important a little bit later. So the balanced scorecard and the POD display are going to be important and worth noting. Let's see here. It is one thing to take what I have here on the board, and I showed you last week, and what your text as illuminated by way of a balanced scorecard. And it is altogether another thing to display something that is indicative of their industry. What do I mean by that? So I had one presentation that did Hue and Cry, a business here in this community that is involved in home security. And it's a large business. It's a large business. They have offices in Oregon and in California. Yeah, I would say a small-sized company, but in the multi-millions. And so they were trying to get at how they could be very effectual at using a balanced scorecard to get at the issues. And so they were very clever the way they did this, and that is they decided to take the balanced scorecard and take each one of these perspectives and present it as a building. And one of the perspective was a building that was on fire. Right? What do you think that one represented? Just without even going through any of the presentation. Trouble or okay? What do you think?
Trouble.
They had another one over here that was smoking. Of the two perspectives, which is, you think, more tantamount to a problem in the organization? Fire versus smoking. And then they had the other two that were beautiful buildings, and they were the buildings that Hue and Cry has had contracts with. And so they were clever enough to even pull those buildings out, even though they didn't know whether the one that was on fire was really a problem client or not. But it worked. Why did it work? Why was it more effectual than simply printing something similar to what you have in the book there, putting in your objective, your performance measure and target, but instead putting that in plus something that is indicative of their industry? Why do you think that was effectual in that presentation?
Visual language.
You're speaking their language, that's right. You're getting at their language, and by getting at their language, you are telling them that you understand them. More importantly, you're giving them the respect at minimum to inculcate, to integrate their industry within this presentation to the extent that you are willing to do it with a little bit of price, a little bit of money to get at very effectually what perspectives were at problems. And it worked. Now, fast forward a year and a half later, the principals of that organization are putting into the plan these students did a year and a half later. Right now, right as we speak, they're going through the process. Isn't that incredible? Beautiful, beautiful thing. And if I'll speak to the principals this week. I'll ask Kim if it's okay if I can talk a little bit more about what they're going to do. It's serious stuff, big stuff. But because they were so good in their presentation, largely, in my view, because when they had this thing covered, and it was covered, and the group got out in front here introducing themselves, and the owner in the back already knew who they were, but they did it professionally anyway. The assumption when you make that introduction is sometimes you're going to have minions who will come in your presentation and they don't know who you are, or superiors who don't know who you are, but they introduce themselves. They got at the introduction. They started to get into the issue. When they got into the issue, boom, someone came over here to raise this thing up, and it was right in their face. Because when they started speaking about the issues, which one of the pictures do you think they were focused in on right off the bat? The thing on fire. What the heck does that mean? Right?
Yeah.
It's exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
And you think, having never seen this before, because they never saw it before, that at minimum they were capturing in their mind the idea that the building that was on fire titled customer could have been the problem in their business, even though they had no context of what this thing was. No context at all. Zip. What the heck is a balanced scorecard? Nobody knows what that is. Your job early on in your presentation is to help them understand quickly what a balanced scorecard is. And the best way you can do that is to personalize it. And I will tell you, every great consultation presentation, whether it's a $5,000 gig or a $100,000 gig, does this. They take some of that money, usually retainer money, and they put it back into the presentation to personalize it. That's what we do. Any consultation does that. It can be lots of ways. One of the more better ways is some of the presentations have brought the business into the room. So the time between one presentation and the lull between that and the next one, they've come in with a crew of people who've set the room up like the business.
Well,
That's right. I've had restaurants who've come in here And they brought staff in here who took all the tables and put white linen and silverware to serve, after the presentation, a very nice dinner. What's the value of having a business owner, or you encouraging your business owner to bring the business in the presentation a little bit more panoramically than not? What do you think the value of that would be? What do you think would the value of bringing stuff in that represents his business or her business? Well, what is, in your view, what would be that value?
It's tangible.
Experience it.
Tangible, experience it,
Yeah, it helps
give
them.
them face, what else?
Also helps them.
Advertising.
Well, it also helps them feel like, okay, they actually get my business.
That's right, and listen up. Supposing you didn't have great pictures that were on fire and were smoking to illuminate the issues, but instead you used elements of the business sitting right here to denote things that work well, that are balanced right, and other things in the business that suck. Welding. Maybe he has got something in his business that is atrocious and is an example of something I would never sell that would represent one of the perspectives that are in trouble.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm getting at? Those are the kinds of things that you can do that bring great merit in your presentation. And all of you should be thinking about what can we borrow from, what can we glean by talking with the owner that will speak to taking this in its abstract and making it more three-dimensional by being inclusive in using their business. Okay, that makes sense? So I will bring an example of that next week so that you can see that and begin thinking about that. The better groups have done this. Great Harvest did a very good job on this when they got at that. And guess what tools they used up here to get at those things that were tasting good and things that were not? What do you think they did?
Bread.
That's exactly what they did. So they had some croissants that would just knock your socks off. And they had the presence of mind to bring them when they were just baked. So it was just like in the air. And I had not eaten, and I got to tell you something. I had to just resist coming over and eating that thing. I'm telling you, it was that good. But it was smoking with flavor, and you knew right off the bat which one of these things was just fantastic. And you could tell very easily, conversely, which one of the elements up here, 4 of them, was just awful. Now you think about the worst tasting bakery item you can think of, and that was there. And there is some bad bakery stuff there, but they had the presence of mind to be able to do that.
Nice.
And that thing that was bad there happened to be, paradoxically, one of the owners, as I told you about. The morning staff person who was being represented by this ugly, gross piece of bakery. So some of you might be saying who are really codependent, like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I want to rescue. I want to enable, how awful that is. No, you want to be truth tellers. You want to be truth tellers. Back to hue and cry. That's what they had to do. They had to be truth tellers because it turned out that the owners of the business were so vested in the business they had difficulty letting the reins go to their children. It was creating issues. I don't know if you know about the failure rate between generational businesses. The longer the generations go, the greater the failure rates. And because they were hanging on to the purse strings and a vested interest, the kids were paralyzed. They couldn't run the business the way they thought they needed to run it because dad and mom were in the way legally with the amount of stock they had in the company. One of the big issues. Okay? How do you get at that? How do you tell that to someone sitting on the back? You're really screwing up, right? You really are. You're disempowering your children to do what they need to do because of your ego and pride, largely because you want to control the business that you've had when you technically gave it up 5 years ago, although you still own more than 50% of the stock. Let's talk about what the failure rate is in and amongst generational businesses. Did that get their attention? Part of the smoking that was going on here, one of the elements that were going on here, generational businesses. What's the objective? What's the performance range? What's the target? Get the heck out as quickly as possible. Is that easy to do? Any of you in here, do you think you could do that in your presentation when the owner's sitting in the back?
No.
I'm telling you, you're gonna do that. If you're being paid $25,000, $5,000, $15,000, I don't care what it is, Do they expect you to tell them the truth, even though it may be painful? What's the answer?
Yes.
Of course they do. And you, students, have the presence of mind, being where you're at right now, to be able to do that, and I expect that of you. I expect that of you. I don't expect any of you to cave because the truth might hurt. To the contrary, I expect you to be truthful. Truthful. Your job is to bless them with what you believe will help them succeed, not what you think they need to hear because it's going to make them feel good. Really, that's your job. So as near graduates of this program, I expect you to wear that presence. Wearing. You're going to need to dress the part. I expect men in this room to wear a suit and tie. I expect you women to look as professional as you would look if you were looking for a job. I'm not thinking of a power suit, so when I think of a power suit, I'm not thinking of a short skirt, this and that. I'm not saying that, women. But I am saying you're going to look good. And all of you in this room have that capacity to do that, and I expect that of you women to do that, okay? I expect you of you. You want to look professional. Preferably to color coordinate. But the better groups have did that. They spend a little bit of time doing that. I have a video that I think I have a little 30-second, 45-second clip that at minimum, it's really awful. It's not as good as your stuff. But it's good enough for you to at least see they spent some time with choreography. And so good consultation does that. Part of the choreography is being dressed. So I do have an expectation for you to come in looking very good that night. Okay, that makes sense? That's something you'd wear on a mission trip. Something that you would wear if you're trying to get a job. And preferably if you knew you were sitting before the board of directors, the president, CEO, somebody very, very important, all of you, and it was a $150,000 job, all of you, at minimum would be going out, not to Goodwill to buy something.
No.
You would be going somewhere to purchase something for that. Now, listen, you can, if you want to go to Goodwill and other places to find really nice, inexpensive stuff to wear for that night, knock yourself out and do it. But I would expect it to look good on you reasonably. Okay? I would expect you to do that. Okay? Does everybody understand that? All right. So the four perspectives, I didn't tell you this week, last week, didn't tell you any of that last week because I didn't want you to go into dissonance. Tonight you can accept that and move in that direction. All right? So the whole framework of this project is built on the balanced scorecard. In these books here, you will see that the groups have gotten at the balanced scorecard fairly well. You'll see, for example, Members First, if you haven't already looked at this, took some time to create a balanced scorecard early on in their presentation in their handbook. Done very, very well on many levels. It's done well graphically, it's done well professionally. The weight of the paper is done well. It's about 24-pound weight on this, okay? If you get up to the 28, it gets a little thick. The 24 is okay. But they just did a very good job on this. If this were put on the PowerPoint, it would be problematic. Why? Okay, that's one. Why else would it be problematic?
Difficult to read.
Difficult to read, which tells us it's got too much what? Information, which is fine if you're sitting at your desk, opening this thing up with your glasses on and reading this line by line, but not in 25 minutes. To the contrary, you don't want to wash out your presentation with a lot of stuff. You want to keep it simple, and you will own the words. You will own the words that will come off of and out of your presentation, not your PowerPoint and or inside your book. Okay? So the whole project is built upon and predicated upon the balanced scorecard. Now, it was very clear in this presentation the objective function was to maximize or minimize. What do you think? It's net income. What do you think they're going to try to maximize here? What is net income? What's the other name for it? Profit. It's the bottom line. Net income is profit. And that's exactly what they were after here, and they put that right smack in the middle as their objective function. They wanted to maximize profit. That net, they may have had to minimize some things here, but it wasn't the issue in this case. If you read through here, what they felt that they had to get at was add-on sales. Cross-train some people, customers that are coming into these branches, so that when they sit down and they open up a checking account, they buy other products. That was the issue. They felt that they could impact their bottom line significantly. A little bit of cross-training, not a whole lot of expense, and allowing people to cross-sell. That was the emphasis here. Of the 4 perspectives, which one do you think they focused in on to do that?
Internal business.
Internal business? No.
Good. No, so internal. What else did we hear? Financial. Okay. What else? What is it?
Oh,
I said internal business.
Employee.
Well, but employee, they need to train.
Why employee?
cross-training.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And by the way, because we're going to do that, it's going to impact this, and this is smoking a little bit. Not a lot, a little bit. And we can put that smoke out by increasing that bottom line if we do what?
Employee training.
Employee training, cross-training. And it will impact the financials because the operating expense, is it going to go down or up if we put money into training? What do you think? It's going to go up. Is that going to affect the net income?
Yes.
Yes. But the cost training is also going to affect the top line, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. That's the argument. So if that's the argument, he's sitting on the back. In this case, it was the board of directors. How are you going to do it? Tell us, consultation group, how we should do that. Unfortunately, because we had an executive VP sitting in here who talked the language she talked and her group talked the language, how we're going to pull this out in a target time frame consistent with the objective and the performance measure. They did a great job. Great job. Anybody who was sitting in here who was not in the baking business with an 8th grade education could have got it. That's how good it was. And that's what you want to do. That's why you don't want to talk about Kaplan and Norton, what they did at Harvard University to develop a remarkable tool for businesses. It's going to fly over their head. Like who? Harvard? Ooh. No, you want to break this thing down so people get at it and understand it in 25 minutes, and they walk away, scratch their head, and say, wow, why did I not do this earlier? All right, so the balanced scorecard. So in this case, for members first, this was all about maximizing net income, and you are right. The perspective that was attacked in this was the customer perspective, the learning and growth, employee perspective, the learning and growth perspective. And they did a very good job of doing this, but they also brought into view the balanced scorecard. A little bit of membership perspective and a little bit of the internal, but I encourage them to stay away from that and stay focused on one or two. And I'm going to encourage you to do the same thing. Your temptation will be, because you think you're going to give a better presentation, is to attack all 4 quadrants. Don't do that. Find what is working, what is balanced, and then throw it out and focus in on what is not working. And explain early on, and I'll show you how to do this with slide management. Explain early on what the issue is and why the others are not. And they will be sitting in the back and shaking their head saying, no, you're right, or they'll be shaking their head, no, you're wrong. Preferably, they're going to be shaking their head saying, you're right. We believe those are imbalanced. And yes, we believe that this is smoking and or on fire. All right. So central in here is what you want to get at objective function. And the only way you're going to get at is surveying, asking questions, talking to the business owner, and figure out what's going on. And I've asked you to minimize it. I've asked you to strike that. I've asked you to think about this either in 2 constructs, and that is to minimize or maximize something. I made it easy for you. Easy for you. In your group, all we'll be talking about what is the issue here? What's the objective function? And you should language what the objective function is. And you should language objective function so he or she understands that, because that is a manageable econ construct. That is, you've got an objective function here that's either going to maximize something or minimize. So what the heck does that mean? They don't know what it means, but you know what it means. We want to maximize for your benefit, owner. We want to maximize here your bottom line, because when you've got greater profit, what happens to the profit? Who gets the benefit of the profit? Who do you think in a credit union? Who gets the benefit? Who are the owners of a credit union? Customers are, right? The bottom line gets benefited, dividends get paid out to the customers. Okay, that's why we want to do that. Now, we're going to show you how to do that. But you will tell them, I'm not going to spend time talking to you tonight about what you're doing well. You know what you're doing well. What we think you are not doing well is taking advantage of the people who you have already trained and training them better so that they're cross-trained to sell collateral products. Simple presentation, got to the bottom line, and someone to become president of Members First. Okay, so the balanced scorecard is something you want to take very, very seriously in your surveys, talking to your business owner. The first objective is to come up with the objective function. What's central? What's the central issue? Because if you get at the central issue early, it'll drive getting at the solution early, or solutions. You'll start thinking about, what can we do to solve this problem? What can we do? And it will help you then talk about objectives, and performance measures, and targets. Earlier you can get at the central issue, the objective function, will foster dialogue and conversation about, very early on, about what are some of the fixes. What are some of the fixes? And once you get at the issue and you get at the fixes, then what happens is, quite nicely, is performance measures, objectives, performance measures, and targets begin to illuminate, become clearer. Because you know what the issue is, you know what the fix is. And when they become clearer, then your target becomes clearer, the measure becomes clearer, the objective becomes clearer. But when you don't have clarity here and you don't have clarity there, this is very out of focus. Now listen to me, you don't have to be right about this. You don't have to be absolutely right about it. Somebody's going to have to come up with what a central issue is and what some fixes are. Okay? The objective function. By the way, if you don't think consultation projects don't happen over a short time frame, you are kidding yourself.
We just did one.
They are fast. They are very fast. 5 weeks is a long time in the world of consultation. It is. Long time. In today's world, turnaround time, 10 working days, high end. You follow me on this? So 5 weeks is a lot. All right, so the balanced scorecard. Now tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about the financial and some performance measures that are worth looking at for both minimizing and maximizing. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. Before I do that though, I want to back up into our previous chapter and talk to you about some things I think are going to be important too. So let's back all the way up to page 131 in your textbook. 131. We'll put some language to this chapter that you don't have. That will be something you might use in your presentation. The language I want you to be looking at is something called operating systems. And we're not talking about CPUs. We're not talking about CPUs here. We're talking about operating systems. Operating systems. The world of business is a language that was used long before Microsoft's language of operating systems, or Apple's operating system. But it's the language of business, and the language of business speaks about the philosophy of the system used in a business to operate in its operating systems. And there are a couple in here that are worth looking at. On page 131, one of the systems that are used quite heavily today that might be worth noting in your businesses is this notion called just-in-time, JIT. So one of these systems out there that has gained a great deal of popularity is just-in-time operating systems. The most recognized business who used this to an absolute extreme over the last several decades was a computer company. Anybody think of a computer company who produced computers just in time rather than displaying it on a shelf. Not Apple?
Dell.
Dell was the pioneer, frankly, in the JIT industry to come up with a methodology by which to minimize inventory and retail space and create an environment, an operating system, whereby they could agree with the consumer and fill the consumer's needs with great specificity that within a very short time, deliver and have a custom computer, just in time. There's a motorcycle company that would gain great popularity in the 1950s, and today it's extremely popular because it makes an awesome sound out of its muffler. Who are they? Harley Davidson. The most disappointing experience I've ever had riding a Harley Davidson is you cannot hear that muffler because sound travels behind you. It sucks. Because you're going down the highway and you want to at minimum hear that great patented, and it is patented, exhaust. You can't. You got to be behind it or sitting somewhere behind it to hear that. Harley Davidson adopted the JIT system. A lot of retailers are doing JIT. Why? What's the obvious reason why JIT?
Cost saving.
Cost saving is huge. What's the cost saving? Minimize what? Inventory. And who do you put the onus on to supply the inventory? The wholesalers. Right? The wholesalers, not you as a retailer. The wholesalers house the responsibility for having the inventory. You call them up and say, I gotta have this Intel beast tomorrow or tonight, and in the environment we live in, that's doable. In fact, there's one company who's gonna be using drones to deliver things probably in the near future immediately.
Isn't that Amazon?
Yes, could be one of those guys. But that fits right smack into this phenomena called JIT. Harley Davidson gets at that. The one that's working very hard to get at that with great success is Walmart. And a lot of other organizations that use JIT. One of the things I want you to be thinking about is, does it make sense to be thinking about business owner as an operating system and use that language to be thinking about JIT? Yes.
Do you typically see an increase in cost of materials with JIT operating system from like the manufacturers? I know you're still ordering large amounts, but it's not, they're having to supply the storage then, and do they typically raise their prices?
So the wholesalers.
Do you get a lower price when you order in bulk? Typically you do, right?
No, well you would on the old system, but not in this system. So wholesalers know this now. They know that they shoulder this.
Okay.
They know that they shoulder this, and consequently they have to grapple with how do we become JIT under the circumstances when the people we're dealing with are very JIT. It's a struggle. The way Walmart handles this, just by the way, so you understand that, and if you're a wholesaler, and you are a wholesaler, who do you think takes the hit? Who do you think takes the hit? If not all the goods the wholesaler sold, Walmart doesn't sell. Who do you think takes the hit? Walmart or the wholesaler?
Wholesalers.
Big time. Therefore, the wholesaler has the duty to not only inform, but to be careful about what goes out that door, and that speaks to the JIT philosophy. However, if you and I were in business, and we owned a wholesale business, and Walmart said, we'll buy, what are we gonna do? It's like, what do you want? And if I have to put into my income statement a hit chart of accounts, that's what I would call it, a hit chart, hit. 5% of my sales, I know I'm gonna get that. Because I just haven't worked out the JIT right, but I am willing to have that so I can tell the world I have what? And what kind of contract? I got a Walmart contract. Is that a big deal? Of course it's a big deal, yeah, right? And that can sell a whole lot more, but
I guess you answered, but I guess my point was the wholesaler, if you're ordering in bulk, do they typically raise their prices and give you, if you're doing just in time, and give you a lower price for like both orders so they don't have to do it, or is it all just kind of?
no, it is not. That's the old model. It is not that. It just doesn't happen the way it used to, where you got bulk discounts for that. GIT doesn't drive that way. To the contrary, it's on a marginal basis. It's on a one unit basis.
Well, and
So
if-
I need one muffler. I need one cylinder or one motor, whatever that may be. And the wholesalers know that. But because shipping has been reduced to such a simplistic and base price construct, it makes it easy to do that on a wholesale environment.
Probably at a wholesaler too, you could still have to manufacture,
That's
Or
right.
actually have to
You can
sell-
play the same game that way if you want to do that.
exactly.
That's
So you're
right.
Giving away the responsibility of storage.
That's right. But it's important for you as business students to know this notion of JIT just in time. JIT is a very relevant context. Joe first.
So JIT is gonna work for a retailer the size of Walmart. How's it gonna work for a mom and pop? I mean, how can they order their product that they're gonna sell just in time for the customer?
Yeah, well, that's something you're gonna try to figure out. And you're gonna try to figure out whether or not it's applicable or not. Right? You're gonna figure that out. And JIT may not be. It does not work for every business.
Right, I
But
can
it
see
does
manufacturing,
have its benefits.
Sure.
You figure if Walmart can do it on the one end, Dell can do it on another, and Harley Davidson can do it on another.
But these
It
are
can.
large.
They are,
You
but
know.
you can reduce that to the margin if you're careful and make it work. You put the onus on the wholesaler. If you say, Mr. Wholesalers, if you want to do business with me, this is the new paradigm, new operating system I am now rendering as a business. And it's the only way I'm gonna be able to operate, right? And that could be part of the consultation, by the way, that you do here.
I think it's also worth noting that we're not talking about just randomly going online to Alibaba and ordering some things. You're actually making contracts with wholesalers
Yeah.
as opposed to just arbitrarily ordering.
Right.
Plus, you have the advantage as a small business of custom picking your parts, so they're very high quality. They want to do business with high quality people as well.
Which we'll come to into TQ in a minute, but that's right on point. So it's not really a function of whether or not I can do this as much as it's a function, how can I integrate a system that can make me more profitable, affect my bottom line, by putting the onus on some other system, in this case wholesalers or manufacturers. It's done all the time. It's done all the time, especially if you've got a business that's up and coming and willing to do this. It's an accepted norm. Okay? The other one that I want you to take a look at before we move on into what we're going to look at tonight is TQM, Total Quality Management. I referred to TQM a couple times, page 138. Page 138. TQM is Total Quality Management. Is worth noting as well. One of the elements of TQM that's not very well articulated in your textbook is this just general notion of what it takes to get at producing a high quality product and or service. But there's a cost of that, and you see in your textbook in the second paragraph in that section the cost of quality, and that needs to be taken into consideration. But it doesn't negate the reality that TQM is worth looking at and noting. And then a third operating system. So the first is JIT, the second is TQM, Total Quality Management, and the third, worth noting, is the theory of constraints. It's this idea that you have bottlenecks in your business. Bottlenecks that are sort of causing flow to be impacted. I got at this many years ago when I bought the rights to Subway sandwiches and salads for the Hawaiian Islands, and we opened up our first Subway store in 1985, excuse me, and on the island of Kauai, and the business was experiencing a phenomena, and that is that we had people lined 100, 150 feet deep. The average average Subway store in 1985, and around the world there were 2,000 stores, and they were averaging $175,000 in annual revenue. Our stores, we ended up owning 26 of them when I sold out, averaged $1 million in sales. But what we did not have as our benefit when we went to University of Subway in Connecticut, we did not have the benefit of figuring out how to deal with the bottleneck that was occurring here. Because the system we used back then was, when a customer came in here to start the process, an employee would stay with that customer all the way through all the stations. Make sense?
Yeah.
And then check out right here. We're having an issue with theory of constraint, big time. And we needed to figure out very quickly how to get this. And so we instituted what they're used today, and that's the system that's used today. In order to get at this. And we solved this problem, by the way, using marginal analysis. Hate to throw that in your face, but we did. We used marginal analysis to figure out what it would look like if we took one employee and had that employee come all the way down here with had one employee and had that employee shift to another station with another employee, 4 employees sitting at a station, for example, and then a cashier, rather than one employee going all the way down, and how would the theory of constraints come in to mitigate that and impact our bottom line. So our objective function was to eliminate the bottleneck. We wanted to minimize that in order to maximize our bottom line, right? And so the system we deployed then was this in order to take a $900,000 to a $1.5 million store that was set up for $175,000, which really didn't work very well, and come up with what we ended up calling the assembly line, which the assembly line is used today in Subway for higher volume stores, and it works. Where we limited staff, so our staff reduced, we increased proficiency because we were using an assembly line, and the theory of constraints was mitigated because we opened up this system. We unclogged the bottleneck. Make sense? So, theory of constraints. Now, I don't know if you find anything within your business that's creating a constraint, but if you do, you would argue that under the theory of constraints by way of an operating system, here's the issue we're having. And for that reason, we're going to be attacking this part of the balanced scorecard to talk about how we're going to deal with that, probably the internal business perspective, how we're going to deal with mitigating a constraint issue that's going on in your business. Conversely, you might find by way of survey that consumers like the business, they enjoy it, but they're not super excited about the quality. They think for the money that they're being paid that they should be getting something that's got a little bit better quality associated with that. What operating system would you be attacking? TQM. Or conversely, you may find that there is so much expense going on here because of inventory overload. And that'll become obvious in the balance sheet. You will see a lot in inventory under assets. And if that's the case, you might be thinking, by way of example, that the operating system they're currently using should be what? JIT. Either way, you have 3 operating philosophies that you all should be looking at somebody in your group right off the bat and asking the question, which one do they look like they are operating from, and or which one should they be operating from by way of a little bit of analysis, and could we incorporate one of the 3 into our presentation? It would be worth noting, right? Be worth noting. So this chapter has value to you because it allows us to put a turn to the way businesses are somewhat operating today in general. And the truth is, a lot of them are operating using a lot of these concurrently, with TQM attached to it, with just-in-time attached to it, and with the theory of constraints. So you can see why it makes sense incorporating the operating philosophies to become either more profitable or to minimize costs. That make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So TQM, total quality management. Right. JIT, just-in-time, or TOC, theory of constraints. You should be thinking of, is there a constraint going on? Is there an issue of quality going on? Is there an issue of too much inventory? Hence, just-in-time. That's how you should be thinking. Somebody in your group should be asking those 3 questions when you're looking at this business and coming up with a potential issue that might, and or defining the kind of business that you might be dealing with. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay. Any thoughts? Any questions? Here it's 8:15. Okay. All right. How are you feeling about right now? You feeling overwhelmed? You're okay?
Overwhelmed.
Eager.
Eager? That's a good word. With all due respect, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling okay.
Yeah, okay.
Real good.
I'll just walk around like a real business.
And why might that be for yourself?
There's so many businesses that could actually use this. You would.
Yeah.
I'm not homeless. I'm here to consolidate.
Ask me clothes.
Yeah, I know.
We're on the game together.
The purple and red one.
Especially if my glasses are like
Shout out your shoulders and
It's like it. And my wife always tells me that when she gets.
I like it.
Guts me with it. Honey, that's red. And that purple. Get your muscle. All right, let's take a 5-minute break, body break. 5 minutes, let's come on back.